In New York, it's UCOMM Live with Kris LaGrange. News, talk, sports, and workforce politics. The loudest, strongest, and most controversial labor news show on, in, and around the internet. Now here's your host, Kris LaGrange.
So author and organizer Phil Cohen will be joining us to share with us his perspective on how the White House can fix the very broken NLRB and labor laws in this country to begin with. Right to work is defeated in New Hampshire. Good for you folks up there. The insurgency, a problem on a Friday, will still work. We just won't be in our world headquarters here in Sioux City, Iowa. So Phil Cohen, get him on. All right. He's an author.
Yep.
But he was a taxi cab driver, made union organizer, and he wrote this excellent op-ed. I just completed it. We recycled it. I guess we'll ask him how many publications across the country covered this.
I thought he wrote it just for us.
Oh, really?
He reached out to ask about it.
Because it's long. It is. It's long. So Phil is the author of Fighting Union Busters in the Carolina Carpet Mill, an organizer's memoir. I hope that book did well.
I hope so. We did a story on it.
And did the story do well?
It did okay. You're actually mentioned on their site as one of the reviewers.
It's okay. Jesus Christ. Cohen drove taxis in the Big Apple before moving to North Kakalaki and became an activist while working as a municipal bus driver. In 1988, he joined ACTWU, known as Workers United.
They're now Workers United.
All right, thank you. And became one of labor's foremost experts on defeating scumbag union busters and employer-sponsored desert campaigns and enforcing safety regulations. And if you go to world-famous UCommblog.com right now and you just put in the little, because it's not right at the top, right?
I think it's the number 2 story on the right.
It's number 2. So if you go to our top 5, it's number 2, so you can find it there. Or you can just go to the little search box and put in his name, and it'll come right up. It's phenomenal. The way I think was put into like 800 words. Think about 800.
Yeah.
So this is amazing. Now I wrote recently an opinion editorial on the PRO Act, but I think my timing is off. Now, as you all know,
yes, because it's federally illegal.
Federally illegal. I snuck it through.
Well, actually, I don't know because it's CBD, not.
And coming back, no, it was marijuana.
Oh, yeah, then that would be.
And then coming back, I had my aerosol sunscreen. They never took it.
I don't know.
But they took my soap.
Yeah.
Sons of bitches. All right, we got Phil. With Jake.
We do have Phil. Here is Phil.
Phil Cohen, author of Fighting Union Busters in Carolina Carpet Mill, former organizer. It's got a long history. Phil, thank you for being with us, buddy. How are you?
I'm doing good, and thanks for having me. Good to be here.
Thank you for writing this excellent piece, brother. I mean, I just finished it again for the second time. Walk us through this piece of art that you gave us for world-famous UCommblog.com.
Okay. I focused on what Biden really needs to do to repair Trump's damage to the NLRB, and will he do it? And I really tried to separate, some of the ideological fairy tales of what would happen in a perfect world from what would be doable in this world.
Mm-hmm.
Meaning, the PRO Act was written in heaven, but it ain't going to pass the Senate here on Earth, unfortunately. And so I focused on alternatives that might actually be doable on planet Earth in 2021. For example, a national ban on right to work ain't going to happen this year, guys, as much as I'd love it to happen, as much as I've spent 30 years in the field organizing and representing workers in some of the worst right-to-work states in the country. However, the worst part of right to work is not that people get to choose whether or not to belong to the union that's in their facility. It's that the fact that the union legally has to represent non-members. I mean, it is the most twisted piece of logic in the free world.
It is.
What other organization has to provide services to people who don't contribute? And the fact is, I can tell you from my 30 years of experience, most non-members are not anti-union. They're free riders. And so a standalone piece of legislation simply saying that right to work remains in the hands of state legislators. But in those 50 or so states that have right to work, unions no longer are legally obligated to represent non-members. And you put that through, and man, will you see membership soar overnight.
Yeah.
You know, union resources start to come back to at least a fraction of what they once were, meaning more organizing, more staff to service. That's something that might be doable.
Yeah. Now, do we have a name for that, Phil?
To get the right replacements into the NLRB.
Okay, so
to
that's
replace the Trump appointees, who essentially had the mandate of dismantling, you know, everything FDR did to encourage collective bargaining during the New Deal.
Now, Phil, let me ask you: can we, what you just touched upon about unions being forced to represent people that don't pay for that service? Can that be something that we can enforce through the National Labor Relations Act without the PRO Act? Do we need to pass a whole new piece of legislation, or
well,
as you said?
I see two possibilities.
Okay, give us the two.
I see a standalone bill that simply addresses the mandate of unions representing non-members. I think it's also possible that the National Labor Relations Board, if we get a good Biden-appointed majority in there sometime this year, using their rulemaking procedure authorized by Congress to change their rules and regulations to simply state that it is not discrimination against non-members for unions to refuse to represent them. Because right to work has in fact been enforced by the National Labor Relations Board since its inception in the Taft-Hartley Act in 1947.
That's excellent perspective, because I feel like we need to do both, Phil. We need to legislate it, and we need to work with the NLRA on that as well, because in 5 years we're going to have a different NLRA. It could be
that's exactly
you know,
right.
and it's constantly going to change, but we're going to have to put laws in place with labor lawyers and local AFL-CIO councils and guys and gals like you who know the law and know how to push it. You talked about three things in your piece here, the things that the Trump administration, in secrecy or committing a crime in plain daylight, about the things that he did to attack shop stewards, and the rules for organizing hospital workers and places that you can leaflet. Can you get into that?
Right. The Trump NLRB, you know, it's interesting. You know, in my book, Fighting Union Busters in a Carolina Carpet Mill, you know, I talk about, you know, what I write about is I was called out of retirement by the union to investigate and expose an illegal union busting plot by Mohawk Industries at its Eden, North Carolina facility. Mohawk is a major Fortune 500 company. They have the support of the Trump NLRB, the National Right to Work Committee, that were hoping to use this as a test case to essentially roll back some of the laws, repeal some of the laws that protect workers from illegal union busting. And we kicked their ass. And we brought Mohawk to its bended knees. So they lost that bid, and the local survived. So the National Labor Relations Board then went and used their own rulemaking procedures to change the very laws that we used to prevail at Mohawk Industries. And what the first order of business for a Trump-appointed NLRB, or at least an NLRB majority, would be to go back to the rulemaking procedure and reverse the changes made by the Trump board. because they reversed regulations that had been in effect since Roosevelt created the National Labor Relations Board back in 1935. And it's an absolute outrage. It's contrary to the very mandate of the agency, which is to encourage collective bargaining.
Yeah. It is it was under Trump and still is a broken agency. Some call it absolutely useless. But one thing that we wrote about on our blog, I forget the Cohen term of it, maybe you know, Phil, that shop stewards can now be disciplined for using profanity when dealing with an employer, and doing the course of their business enforcing the collective bargaining agreement. What's the?
Yeah, that's right. I wrote about that in my article, and that was a precedent.
Yeah.
That was set in a ruling by the Trump NLRB.
Yeah.
And the foundation, the legal foundation of the relationship between local union rep and management is that when they're meeting in a collective bargaining or a grievance context, they're meeting as equals, not as employer and employee.
Yeah, and Trump definitely took that away.
If I had a nickel to every time a member of management used profanity at me, I would be a wealthy man today. I mean, the industrial environment is a rough and tumble world. Everybody cusses like a sailor.
Yeah.
Except people who don't for religious reasons, and even they do when they think their fellow church members aren't listening.
Yeah. And
to say that if a shop steward loses his temper, perhaps being, provoked and ridiculed by a member of management, like, who the hell do you think you are to come into my office and question my decisions? He can be disciplined or fired for simply using a cuss word. My God, this is the 21st century. It's not the 19th century.
Yeah.
And whoever came up with this law, fuck you. How's that for profanity?
Another thing you wrote, that millions of workers have lost the right to leaflet in their workplace if the property is owned by a third party but not occupied by the employer. What does that mean?
Look, that's really carving out a major loophole in the intent of the law.
Mm-hmm.
You have many industrial facilities that occupy or are built upon property owned by a third-party realtor. So that means if a company builds a distribution center
mm-hmm.
and leases the property, and then there's a union organizing drive or there's a union in place that's in the middle of a labor dispute, its workers do not have the normal access rights to the company property to be able to hand out leaflets and union material, as long as it's not inside the plant and disrupting working.
Yeah. Now, another thing, you said new restrictions have been placed on the right of organizers to communicate with hospital workers. Is that because of the pandemic, or is
No,
this?
it wasn't.
Okay.
Again, it was common practice, since hospitals are essentially public facilities, that organizers could go into the cafeterias, which were open not just to employees but to the general public.
Yep.
And have an opportunity to speak with hospital employees so as to not be interfering with their doing their job. But now, under the Trump NLRB ruling, they can no longer do that.
Now, are you not a big fan right now of the speed in which President Biden is making the NLRA work again for working people? Because you did mention at one spot that it's symbolic, but there's got to be more. There's got to be more changes. Am I correct in assuming that?
Biden did what was possible to do right now.
Mm-hmm.
Because the governing board of the NLRB is a 5-person panel appointed for staggered 5-year terms. So it's not like the cabinet. You have a new president, the old cabinet goes, and a new cabinet is appointed. We got to wait for terms to expire. And as of right now, we have 1 Democrat, 3 Trumpists, and a vacancy.
Okay.
Trump has nominated an SEIU attorney who would make a fantastic board member.
Oh, you mean Biden has?
Of course, these appointments have to get through the Senate.
Yeah.
But even if she, by some miracle, her appointment was to be approved, and she was sitting on the board the first of next month, you'd still have 3 Republicans to 2 Democrats, and, you know, all decisions are on a majority basis. But William Emanuel will be the first Republican to have his term expire on August 27th. And then we truly have an opportunity for a Biden-appointed progressive majority to start to systematically undo all the damage done to the board by the Trump appointees, and hopefully put in some more progressive rules and regulations to take us a step beyond that. But once again, they've got to pass the Senate.
Yeah.
You know, the election of Joe Biden with a very slim majority in Congress is not the beginning of utopia.
No.
Because every decent thing he's going to try to do is going to be confronted with roadblocks. And I think it really comes down to this, okay?
Mm-hmm.
I believe Biden is sincere about his being pro-union. The billion-dollar question is this: how much will he prioritize that in the months ahead?
Yeah.
Is it something that, you know, in the broad spectrum of issues that he's trying to deal with, that he's going to trade at the bargaining table, or is he going to stick to his guns?
I'm hoping that
Obama was pro-union, not a lot of pro-union rhetoric. And actually, in his second term, some really bad things happened to unions. Because even though Obama is pro-union, he did not prioritize being pro-union.
Yeah.
And we're not going to get even a fraction of the way where we need to go unless Biden is not only sincere about being pro-union, but he prioritizes being pro-union.
And I think we all got to take responsibility over that. Phil Cohen, you, myself, as a labor communicator. There's other effective labor communicators out there. I think you should give Rick Smith a call and go on and talk about your piece. And we got to make this conversation a kitchen table topic. So in going to the midterms, we hold every elected official on a Democratic side, feet to the fire, being like, we need to support our leader, President Biden, and get these changes at the NLRA. If you can't give us the PRO Act, unless we elect 60 Democrats in this country in the Senate, then do this for us. And we need our president to lead by example. And like you said, hopefully not sell us down the river to get reelected, or to have whomever of his choosing get reelected. We're in a real pickle here, and we are far from out of the woods here with the darkness of the Trump years.
I can just tell you, as a tactician who's been sent in, you know, by Workers United, SEIU, to fight their Mission Impossible battles for the last 30 years, what works best when you've got your back to the wall and you're outgunned is a surgical approach, not a frontal assault. The PRO Act, as much as I personally believe in it, is a frontal assault. We need surgical strikes for the things that are most destructive in American labor law. And those surgical strikes, I think, will stand a better chance of getting through the Senate.
All right. Thank you so much, Phil Cohen, for joining us and sharing your perspective.
Let me one more thing.
Yes, you may, sir.
I want to suggest that, you know, my book is available wherever books are sold, but Fighting Union Busters in a Carolina Carpet Mill. It reads like a novel. It's a great action story, but it contains more information about the inner workings of corporate union busting, the inner workings of the National Labor Relations Board, and the legal and organizing tactics necessary to successfully navigate all of that than you're going to find anywhere else. The best place to get it is on my website.
Don't go to Amazon.
Unionbusters.org. because I am passing on the 40% author's discount to union members, and I'm including a free CD of Working Class Music, which is my last album. So you can get it anywhere, but the best place to get it is fightingunionbusters.org.
There you got it, fightingunionbusters.org. Go buy the book. Phil Cohen, thank you so much, brother, for joining us. Come on in anytime. You're welcome, my friend. Okay, thank you for your time.
My pleasure for being here.
Okay, God bless you. Take care now. All right. I could listen to him for hours.
Yeah.
But I could, and I know the audience couldn't. Because you fuckers have a low attention span. But he is an incredibly intelligent man. And I think...
well, and he's been through the battles for decades now.
Yeah. I mean, he might be right. I mean, fixing the NLRA, but we need to legislate it. I mean, I would love to make this a topic of conversation for every pollster across the country in this midterm election. I mean, if it means that, okay, listen, Sinema, you're out. Warner, you're out. Manchin, you're out. And Kelly, you're out. We're going to go ahead and withdraw your